Good morning, good evening, good day to you wherever you are. I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is NycosRPG. This is a new old experiment. Hi, I'm Jonathan, as I said, and this is NycosRPG. Said that twice now. Let's go with take three. Hi, I'm Jonathan. This is NycosRPG. Welcome to our new old experiment here on our channel. Roleplay Roulette. And this is going to be episode 1, and I'm going to endeavor to try something I've not done before. This will be recorded and placed on YouTube, and if you're watching this on YouTube, realize that, yes, I'm talking to you. You are invited to be a participant. So if you would, go ahead and like and subscribe and hit all the buttons so you get all of our videos. And also do me a favor and put a comment in the comment section if you do want to be a part of this. All you need to do from this point on is respond to the narrative with your description of what I need from you at that moment into the chat, into the comment section, and I will endeavor to interpret that in the next episode. We will only literally be doing one scene per episode, so it's not going to be incredibly difficult for you to do, but simply go into the comment section, put in the letter C and a number. Generally, just watch the others that are on, and if no one else is there, you're C1. If you see a comment that's got a C1, put a C2, and so on, and then put in what you want to add to the story. I will be using, therefore, the comment section to drive the role play, because what the big experiment is I would like to be the game master for the world. I've been GMing for 50 years, and I do so in groups small and large. The smallest group I've individually run a game for is 2. I don't like doing it. It isn't pretty. But generally, I run between 3 and 17-ish, and I have run as many as 111 in the same RPG session, but there's more to it than that, so I'm sure we'll get into it. Until then, go ahead and do all the buttons so that we keep the show going, and I continue to make it a daily show. And we'll be doing these only once a week, so on Fridays, that is my day, and that's the day we will be doing the episodes of Roleplay Roulette. We may do 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 episodes in a day, depending how many players we have and how much interaction we have. At this moment, there aren't any viewers on the Twitch channel where I record, but that is where we're at on every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. So Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. and 11 p.m., all in the Pacific time zone. And we run games, we do dialogue, I do some soapboxing, I do some ranting, and so on. So join us. I think we'll have a really good time. This channel is dedicated to game masters to show them how they can improve their games in the local basis and make every single game session outstanding. So let's talk a little bit about what Roleplay Roulette is. About, probably 50 years ago now, I started role-playing games with Dungeons & Dragons, and for better than a decade, that was the only RPG that I ran. Now, I did play in other games, Call of Cthulhu, or just a ton of different ones, Tunnels and Trolls, and titles you never heard of. There was a Star Wars role-playing game, and then there wasn't, and then there was a Star Trek role-playing game, and then there wasn't, and then there was another Star Trek game, and then there wasn't, and so on throughout the decades. So I've always been fascinated with role-playing other genres, but it wasn't, I suppose, for the first 10, maybe 11 years before I actually dipped my toes into the other mechanisms, because I'd become so familiar with Dungeons & Dragons and the fantasy setting that I really thought that's all there was to role-play. When I realized there was more, I kind of opened the floodgates. And so I've been a storyteller and game master for the entire 50 years, but the types and styles and dimensions of the games that I run have varied over the decades. But about 2 years ago, I devised the NycosRPG mechanism, and it has been a lifesaver ever since. I utilized it to move myself or transport myself out of the confining thought processes of traditional roleplay games and to reach this new level of roleplay through the Nycos system. And then I realized this needs to be opened up. And so right now I'm working on a Kickstarter project for NycosRPG that will include Roleplay Roulette, but it will also provide access to not just one, but a total of 7 books. One master book covering the core basics of roleplay, and then 6 system books, each one dedicated to a genre. So I thought I should build Roleplay Roulette so that as we add new genres and new concepts, we have a way to test them. And so I devised the the community identity sheet, the CIS. I've talked about that before. And so the CIS is an instrumental part of Roleplay Roulette on a general basis, because it is the way in which the storyteller can, in the same span that it takes a player to put together a persona, he can be putting together the story. So let's talk a little bit about the wheel. As you can see, it's stage left? No, stage right. No, stage left. I always get that backwards. It's over here. And the roulette, and then I'll be able to identify it here in just a second. Let me get over to it and give it a spin. All right, so the roulette wheel literally spins and tells us what genre we're going to play in, and making it so I can get to it faster. There we go. Yeah, what fun. Oops, that doesn't work. Let me see. Yeah, it does not work. Gotta leave that full screen. Yikes. All right, well, we tried. Tried valiantly. But there you can see that it's saying Dive Storm. So each of the genres has a name that has the naming convention for NycosRPG. All of the system books are going to start with the letters Delta and Sierra, D and S. So Downshift, Dark Shards, Dive Storm, Dread Signs, and so on. And each of the titles captures not a specific realm, perhaps, but definitely a specific setting or genre. So in this case, Dive Storm is a near future dystopian culture wherein humanity, because of the effects of global warming, have been forced to live in submerged housing and live below the surface of the water. Kind of has a Sequest DSV kind of a feel to it, kind of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The very concept is that you're dealing with politics and dynamics of nations that are defined not by physical location above the water on a continental mass, but instead on the depths of the ocean, and are fundamentally operating after the fashion of organized city-states within those borders and empires and all of that. So, but each of the spins will put us there we go, Deathly Shoals, for example. And Deathly Shoals is our fantasy pirates setting. So it's all things dealing with chaos, magic, storms, and creatures from the deep, and It's not quite full on Cthulhu because it's dealing specifically with the kind of beings you might meet in such a setting. And finally, my last spin for the morning. Dreadnaught Squadron. Okay, these are all four of these. These last four have all been part of the new batch. As I said, I originally created 6 different genres to put underneath the umbrella of the NycosRPG launch, and then these are now test beds for potentially future launches. And so, if as we have been rolling, and I did say that'd be my last, since we've been rolling and spinning, this has been my last spin. I'm going to go with this one for our very first episode. So, NycosRR episode 1. Let me make a new header for that really quickly. I've got to do a little bit of fancy footwork here. Alrighty. Rico. Roland. Slight adjustment down. Alrighty. So, since this is a sub-show within the show, let me do a quick little recap header. Hello everybody, I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is our new show, Roleplay Roulette. This is going to be our Friday episodes. We're going to start it off with a slightly different event, but each episode will be encapsulated in the live stream show that will then be capped out and placed in its place on YouTube after recording. This episode is the first of our series and the first of any roleplay in the Nycos Grand Experiment here. So, episode 1, Dreadnaught Squadron. So, if you are hopping in and have not watched our show before, welcome. Make sure you like and subscribe. And if you want more information, check out patreon.com/Nycos and find out how you can be a part of this grand experiment. All right. So, episode 1. A little bit of background. This exposition is unfortunately required and will be pretty much at the beginning of each episode, and I will be using a specific name for that, so let me pull this up here and clarify. It has its own little name, and that is our story so far. I actually use this in my regular roleplay groups as a mechanism to remind us all where we are, because it is a challenge, really, to keep in mind all the details of every episode that I do. And since I'm currently running 6 game sessions a week, and that's 6 different groups of 6 to 10 players, that means it's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of stories that are separate. So each story, I begin with our story so far. Usually I'll only speak for a few minutes about what I do remember of the adventure, and then I have the players in that episode remind me where we are in the story. But as this will be recorded material, pretty much I'll be able to prep for that day's episode in as far as I can. So since we have already spun the wheel and have gotten to Dreadnaught Squadron, I'm not going to be countermanding that, but in the future we will come on and then roll the wheel. And if we happen to come back to Dreadnaught Squadron, I will be maintaining this storyline for as long as we have players involved with it. So if you want to be a part of it, you can, even if you're watching this on YouTube, yes, I'm talking about you, sir, who's not played a roleplay game since you were 12 and you think it'd be fun, but you're not sure how to get started again. Welcome to the game. All you need to do is put a comment in the comment section, start with the letter C, and then whatever number, look through the comments to see anybody else that's assigned a number to themselves. And if they haven't, your congratulations, C1, and then C2, and so on. And my plan, my nefarious plan, until it becomes absolutely untenable, is to run a role-play game for those players who are online with me or who have watched the previous episode, and I will take their input and therefore sculpt the story for the next week's episode. And so our story so far will always be a recap. As this is the first one, the exposition is going to be literally about the setting and the information that you need to know in order to play. So, Dreadnaught Squadron is a game in an alternate history period in the world of Nykos. Now, first of all, Nykos is a fantasy sci-fi merger type of setting. In particular, it is normally, traditionally, Dark Shards, high fantasy, deep state, mysteries and spies. And so this is somewhere between them, but add into it a little bit of the Dread Signs era, so it's pre-World War II. And so we are involved in what is being considered at this time the Great War. Now, it started in Yarland when the leader of one of the factions was untimely put down by another culture, and accusations started flying about who might be involved, leading to that first Great War. And so we are starting our setting about 18 months into the war. The skies over East Yarland have been cloudy and gray, and the reddish tones of the ocean have been accentuated by black clouds hovering out over the sea for several days. It portends of a great storm, but it has not yet broken. Our story begins upon the vessel Dreadnaught. And that's a funny thing to call a Dreadnaught class ship Dreadnaught, but it literally is the first of the fleet. Now, a Dreadnaught, by definition, is a heavier than air aircraft, designed by, I believe it was, Ludwig Zeppelin, Zeperyn. Nykos name, not anything you really know about, but no, that Zeppelin was one of the persons who instituted heavier than air aircraft that were being held aloft by the gas released when balsamic powder is burned, put the Eastern Kingdom of Bylos at the forefront of technology. So the Dreadnaught's name is currently, as I said, Dreadnaught. If we as a group decide to change that name, or you come up with a pretty cool name for this first vessel, I totally believe in retconning. I'm a rule of cool storyteller, not a rule says written person. Not that the rules are widely dispersed, but as a quick aside, if you go to NycosRPG.com and go to the Ready to Play section, you can download a PDF of the Master Book Fast Play Rules. I think it's a 8 or 10, 12 page PDF covering the basics of how to play NycosRPG. And also there you can pick up a copy of the persona profile packet. It's a 3-page document that you'll need to have for your persona. You can play roulette without a persona. You don't have to have one, but if you're looking for the real experience of playing a role-play game with us, you will want to download one to keep with you while you're watching and playing. So, in this role-play roulette, you pick a persona to represent. You don't have to be a military person to be aboard the Dreadnaught, as it is the flagship and the centerpiece, considered to be the equivalent of the German airship Hindenburg. Not hopefully with that end, but it could always happen. But the concept is that you are guests upon the maiden flight of the Dreadnaught, we're calling currently cleverly Dreadnaught. This vessel has a displacement of, I think it was 2 million cubic meters of brissom gas provided by 4 lower port engines. They tend to have to steam at about 20% or so to maintain flight status. That means they've got enough buoyancy to be airborne. And the loss of lift from this material is relatively slow because the craft's skin is actually liminal coated, that is provided with a magical sheen that holds the gas in and thereby allows for the buoyancy. So with those 4 engines chugging away happily at about 20%, the vessel can stay airborne virtually forever. Of course, it does require fuel, and that comes in the form of literally coal cars worth of balsamic powder, akin to what we would think of in Terra as black powder, but it's just a naturally, magically reagent material that is mined from the mountains of the world of Nykos. So there's 2 to 3 coal cars worth of fuel aboard on the launch of any mission, and the Dreadnaught is engineered to have about a 3-month flight duration, so it can continue flying from location to location for about 3 months before it will need to refuel. So the engineers in the group are already doing the math to figure out how fast that burn rate is and how much fuel has to be shoveled in. I don't personally know those numbers because I don't particularly care. I just set out the parameters, then we can work backwards for players that are interested in that. I guess that's probably one of the things that I have to say about the world of Nykos is that in any of our adventures, when you are in the game, you are determining the level of attention we give to any given detail. So the farther down you drill in a story, the deeper the hole becomes. And there's 50 years of story that we can draw into. But in this case, we are speaking specifically within the Dreadnaught Squadron era of the game. Now, this Dreadnaught also has a couple of peculiarities, one of which is that there is a tiny hangar literally on its spine that basically it's dorsal, so it's way up on the top of the craft. And from that point, this vessel can launch small airborne aircraft. So these smaller craft are powered by brissom, but by the active burning of it, and so therefore they're much more volatile. They have a much shorter flight time, and they're rather smoky. They are almost, if you were going to do a storyline comparison, you'd say this was somewhat of a steampunk kind of an era, because these brissom engines belch out a lot of black powder as a result of the conversion process, which basically equates to dropping 1 drop of luminous into 1 ounce of powder and letting the two react for a period of time before you have to repeat. But of course, the larger bore engines use more, and so the fighter craft tend to be fairly high-powered, high-performance craft. And they actually have a landing strip of a type on the top of the craft, akin to the flight deck of a aircraft carrier. So, therefore, as a member of this adventuring group, you can choose whether you want to be a member of the crew of the Zeppelin Dreadnought, or if you want to be a member of the flight crew for the fighter craft. Perhaps you're a novelist who's simply going to visit the war front because you're concerned with what it's doing to humanity. Perhaps you are a journalist who simply is tracking the details of this maiden flight. But before we actually launch into the mission story, I wanted to give you a little bit of background. So, the skies of Nykos are not blue as they are here on Earth. Instead, they are somewhat of a purplish gray. I think the actual formal term for the color is mauve. But just like the sky is blue, the blue can be anything from cerulean to indigo, depending on the time and weather conditions. So it's hard to say the sky is mauve, but generally speaking, it's that pinkish purple, and that's because it's reflective of the fundamentally magically photosynthetic life that lives in the ocean itself, giving it its deeper color. Along the shorelines, the oceans take on a kind of a rosé wine coloration, barely some pinkish tones to it, but generally looking almost clear. As you go out into deeper waters, however, the life forms that live beneath the waves tend to convert their energy from the light spectrum and reflecting red. So therefore, in the deepest parts of the ocean is virtually black because the depth of the hue becomes so deep, and therefore it's considered to be black water. So a vessel that travels out over the ocean, once they're getting beyond the line of sight to the shoreline, they are entering black waters and therefore entering areas of danger. Now, the central body of water between the two continents of Yarlum and Groland is called the Twain Sea, T-W-E-Y-N, and the Twain Sea's depths do get considerable. There is a Challenger trench level crevasse that runs down the middle of the Twain Sea, providing it with the deep, deep black color that most sailors are familiar with. But that body of water, although treacherous, because of the merits of powered flight and powered seacraft, you can crisscross the water surface relatively easily. Ludwig van Zepperen built the very first of the Zepperen. I should say Zephyrin. Yeah, I think we'll call them Zephyrin. Zephyrin. The Zephyrin craft are fundamentally built because of the precarious nature of sea travel. You see, the oceans of the world of Nykos are rife with all kinds of sea life, to the point where, according to myths and legends during the more ancient times, the very creatures of the sea were able to inhabit the airways. So the Zephyrin was Ludwig's concept of how to move with luxury and style over the areas of conflict and be virtually unscathed. Now, the craft's flight characteristics do limit its elevation to right around 8,000 to 10,000 feet at the upper ends, not because of atmospherics per se, but instead of temperature. There is a radical cooling that occurs as you go more airborne, and so the upper elevations are very near unto impassable as you're you simply get too cold within craft. Even if you have excellent heaters, the idea is that the craft will cool down far too quickly if you get above altitudes of 10,000 or so feet. Therefore, although in this era firearms do exist, they have figured out how to compress the balsamic powder to a very small area, encapsulate it, and then once you break that seal, release all that energy. So there are ballistics and there are even artillery pieces, but they are too slow and cumbersome to re-aim that a Zephyrin can outrun. Even the slowest Zephyrin flying into a headwind can outrun the guns on the ground if we're talking about artillery. But that doesn't stop small arms fire. For that reason, the captain of the Zephyrin will usually deploy 2 to 4 Magi fore and aft, whose job it is to prevent small arms fire or perhaps interference by airborne creatures from beneath. Now, there are, unfortunately, in any scary story, you have to have beasts that can ply those terribly cold temperatures above, and so we do have drakes and other horrible beasties that fly. They pretty much live their lives aloft in those higher elevations. But we're not going to be concerned with those as this is the early part of a fall, and therefore they have already begun their processes of going into dormancy, whatever those mechanics are. We haven't discovered them yet. So this is the very first story I'm telling in this realm. There's a lot of who knows going on here. So if you are viewing this and you want to put some input, feel free from here at the get-go, because this is a role-play game. I'm the storyteller, and if you're sitting here watching this, you are part of the games group. Whether you are an active participant or just a passerby or a bystander who just wants to listen in, nonetheless, just realize you can submit conversation into the chat, and I will respond to that, because even though I spend most of my time trying to look at the camera, if you haven't noticed, I do happen to tend to drift my eyes to what would be the right here. All right, pardon me for a second. Rehydrate. Alrighty, so this is a crisp October morning. The Zephyrin named Dreadnaught has finally left dry docks to much ballyhoo and lots of celebration and excitement. The cabins are ample. If I recall correctly, the Zephyrin Dreadnaught can carry a crew and complement of about 60 personnel. So it's a healthy vessel, and it does have a considerable cargo compartment, which has been sequestered by the Bailani government for special projects. So we're not sure what we're carrying, but we do know this maiden voyage is meant to circle the globe. The intent is for this vessel to become the equivalent of the Great White Fleet in the Roosevelt era, and present to the world the strength of the Bailani Empire. We are lifting off from a city that is called Talos, and Talos is a metropolis by sheerest definition, an industrial port city, multifunction, and acting currently as the capital of Bailon. They are working on a tower, of course, because we have to have those quirky comparatives, but they are building basically a standalone city-state out in the plains of Bylus, which will, of course, be called Babel or Babylon. And it's just now under the engineering review, with the first workers showing up in the spring. So This is rather ambitious of the Bailani government to be preparing for such a massive undertaking, literally on the eve of the beginnings of a world conflict. Nonetheless, there are more than 20 ports of call on the docket, and we are currently steaming out of Bailas, and we are heading south. Now, there are 2 places that will be stopped at along the continental ridge as you round the horn. And the first of those will be a place known as Snowland's Call. And it's said to be a fairly cold place. It's at elevation because it's in the mountains on the south. And so the Zephyrin is perfectly suited for going there even when the weather is so inclement that vehicles and even pilgrims can't ascend to its heights. So it's going to be somewhat of a mercy run to Snowland's Call to make sure they have sufficient supplies. It has been a rather treacherous winter so far, and with a shortened harvest season leading into this, Snowland's Call may actually be at its lowest supplies in decades. So some are conjecturing, of course, that perhaps at least a portion, if not the majority, of the cargo space that's been sequestered by the Bailani government may be supplies for Snowland's Call and other places, and it's being kept from the populace to prevent there being any kind of raiding and such going on, simply because the times have been so hard that they've got to take every precaution. So if you're joining me and you haven't heard, this is the Roleplay Roulette Experiment, Episode 1, Dreadnaught Squadron. Literally it's called so because that's what we rolled on the roulette wheel, which is why it's still showing. And we will be using the roulette wheel every Friday to run a roleplay game. And I'm going to be doing this in almost like a play-by-mail concept. I'm going to present the information, put it up on the YouTubes, so to speak, and then you will be able to put comments in there to give actions for persona in the game. But if you're here on Twitch, you have the rare benefit of actually being a player in this very first concept, and each week we'll be adding additional players as they find their courage to do so. And it doesn't mean you have to be a full-on persona. It's not like a traditional role-play game where you've got to build your character and go. You can actually put the notes here in the chat box, and I'll just go with whatever we come up with. Now, when we get to the point where we have too much text coming in, we may not be able to do this anymore, and we'll have to figure out another way to do it. I anticipate eventually it will be a subscriber function. So if you subscribe now, you'll be grandfathering yourself into any of those kind of conditions in the future. And that includes when we go to the subscriber base on YouTube. So that's yet another consideration for why you want to make sure that you like and follow us here and subscribe if you can, so that you lock yourself into the subscriber benefits package, or conversely that you join us over on the YouTube channel. There, of course, play is not going to be live, at least for a while, because I don't broadcast over there live shows. Not that I won't in the future, but I'm reserving all of those for now. But I'm leaving that as a benefit for watching here on Twitch and being a part. You can actually interact immediately with us. Alrighty, so as I said, we're leaving the city of Bailas. The moorings that have kept us Nycos bound are being released by the ground crew. The wind is a brisk, I always remember, northeaster. So the wind is blowing southwest. I always get it backwards, but you just name the wind by where it's coming from. So it's a nor'easter blowing in. That stormy cloud bank has not yet seemed to make any approach towards land. So it may be lucky enough that we can get far enough south to avoid that. The captain has basically turned off all the known smoking signs, and the beverage carts and the food carts are beginning to roll down the stateroom corridors. The vessel is a absolute picture of luxury. Although we have a crew and complement of 60 personnel, the number of civilian personnel is nearly double that. Most of them sightseers, many of them businessmen, and a few journalists in the mix as well. And if you're viewing and you want to play, you can pick any of those to be. As a matter of fact, you don't have to pick a specific one. You can call out just simply for me to add in dialogue scenes and such, because those can be the best, especially when we get interactors on both sides of the conversation from the audience, so to speak. So this is an experiment. I don't know how well it's going to work, and this is literally the first episode, so we won't know really until next week how much of a pickup this is, but we're going to give it a shot. And until I've been told I can't do this anymore, we're going to continue to do this. I have been a storyteller and game master for 50 years before this, damn it, and so I'm sure I can go another 50 years in this kind of a format, just adding additional players and widening the vision of what roleplay can be. So, the local news. Let's back up a little bit and talk about the newspapers. As the ship starts to steam out and blasts the air horn to announce its departure, the gathered crowd are shouting their support and waving frantically, trying to capture the eye of someone with a camera who might take their picture from this as yet nominally undiscovered lands vista. While, as I said, flight has been a active part of the world of Nykos for 20 to 30 years, and the technology is rapidly improving, nonetheless, there are those who have been afraid of it, and culturally, many of the kingdoms have not supported the activities of the daredevils who fly these machines, simply because of the risk that they represent and that they are an unknown quantity. Some of them have even labeled the concept of air power to be a joke, a passing fancy, a fad, if you will. But if you're aboard, you actually are dedicated to this in some fashion, whether to debunk it or to support the activity, or simply to get from here to there. The vessel's 20-city path includes some of the greatest capitals in the current world of Nykos, and visiting locations on both sides of the building conflict. Now, there has been some active gunfire in isolated areas, but so far the governments collectively have been downplaying and poo-pooing those challenges, suggesting that it's wayward soldiers who are out on weekend leave with a little bit too much alcohol and too much ammunition. The crew of the Dreadnaught are dressed to the nines on this launch day. They're wearing their dress uniforms where they can. Even the workers who are on work detail are wearing their cleanest and most ship-shape sailing attire as they can get. Now, the coloration of the Bailani fleet are blacks, golds, and reds, with emphasis on black. The majority of the uniform is black. Now, in the case of the dungarees of the workers aboard, no, they're actually the traditional deep indigo, deep purple of the local clothiers. And while they look rather ragtag, many of them have detachable patches and functionally different sleeves that can be placed on. There are areas of the cloth that are built so that you can attach or detach a pocket with just a minimal amount of tugging. And so those who are precise engineers and such might have 40 or 50 of the small pockets covering their chest and their upper thighs, almost the way, say, Terrans like their cargo pants and vests, but especially if they has as the Black Widow would say, so much pockets. The core uniform for your day workers, your attendance crew, are the typical deep red and white narrow striped shirts, short sleeve, close cropped, and again the deeper, almost purple dungarees. And they usually blouse their boots that are like shiny leather because of the active trade with the Trelorans, and for the amount of seal cloth and such that they can purchase from the mirror. It's a rather extensive and rather fancy looking arrangement. The vessel is utilizing in its galley the finest silver flatware and dishware possible that has been acquired from the Eldrin populations in the Highlands. As I said, the city of Bylon is a metropolis, and if you can't get it in Bylos, it doesn't exist. That's fundamentally the rule. So there are even a couple of what's the word I'm looking for? Travelers with tickets. What's the word for it? God, my brain just froze. But several of the passengers, that's what I was looking for. Several of the passengers do have unique companion animals, including one or two of oversized lizards. Some would call them wormlings. And there's also, at least on that first, as you were first boarding, you thought you saw a fairy dragon. So there may be a small mystical lizard with butterfly wings aboard, but you haven't seen it since day one, since the morning you boarded, which was yesterday. So you've keep your eyes open for that. Meals are either served in your cabin on request, or in the large galley area, the cafeteria area, on the leeward side of the middle decks. They switch from the leeward side to the windward side depending on the velocity of the winds aloft, because if the vessel is steaming along as it is right now with the tailwind, you could pretty much sit on either side, but to maintain the community feel, they are segregating just to the leeward galley deck and the mezzanine. There are 4 levels of of compartments. You can be in first class, you can be in standard class, or you can be in steerage. And the ones that are in steerage are actually tiny compartments that run along the entire spine of the vessel, even back between the 2 large cargo pods. So a great number of personnel walk up and down this major main corridor, and generally they'll do so either on the main deck or on the mezz. And the mezz is a deck that only runs half the depth of the ship inward, and then you have to descend by staircases or lifts down to the main deck. And the main deck corridor goes, as I said, all the way back. But security teams are set up at the midpoint just before cargo, and they are checking IDs to make sure everyone aboard is legitimate and has the appropriate tickets and accesses for those locales. The final bit of information I want to go over is that we are, as I said, going to Simon's Call, and so most people are dressed in their finery, but also with fairly sturdy and warm winter clothing. It was warned early on that the vessel may at certain times be forced into higher elevations, and therefore it will be necessary to have the cold weather gear. But they do have, of course, within your own wardroom, you have the capability of putting your clothing into your trunk, and therefore providing it a modicum of safety and security. There are, of course, for the first class, additional benefits such as a ship's safe, but the only persons that have access to that are on a fundamentally need-to-know basis, and as a nominal passenger, you wouldn't have a need-to-know. So all of those details are remaining out of touch. So we have now set the stage for Dreadnaught Squadron. I've provided a little bit of information about the setting and where we are starting, and I anticipate that we will have players boarding between now and next week. If the off case that does not happen, of course, we will continue the voyage on a narrative basis with or without players. But I want to thank you if you've been watching with us and been a part of the show. Thank you for your support. We hope that you are a follower for the channel. If not, I would definitely recommend subscribing to the channel, because subscription means you don't have to watch the annoying commercials. I know that we've gone over the traditional 30 minutes of my episodes, so I know that you had to endure commercials for today, and unless of course you're one of my few subscribers, but of course feel free to do that in the future to avoid that. Also, if you are watching on YouTube, this is the episode for Friday the 18th of October, and we're going to be doing this on an ongoing basis every Friday at 10 a.m. We also broadcast at 11 p.m. and again at 10 a.m. every day, Monday through Friday, so you can get additional information on the world of Nykos, some tips and insight as a 50-year game master, and provide you with the tools to make your games excellent, including the new NycosRPG toolbox. So that will be coming soon. We are in the final stages of getting the initial edition edited. Don't say that too many times fast. That's too many E's in a sentence. But when we have that initial set of volumes ready, we will be announcing a Kickstarter. So watch for that in the upcoming months or so. So until then, thank you again for being here, and we really appreciate you being here for Roleplay Roulette. And I will talk to you next